What is up, YouTubes? It's time for another pre-release guide with our latest expansion set, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. In this guide, we will touch on all the new things like mechanics, card types, and the flavor bombs that make up this set. Then we'll roll into the archetypes, highlighting the signpost gold cards and best synergy pieces, because that's what we all need to know for deck building time. Then I'll give you my tips on how to build the best deck for your card pool. And finally, some set assessments for how to take down your pre-release. Hit that like button for the algorithm. Check out Card Kingdom once you figure out what cards you need from the set. Now, let's get into it. This set is all about Dungeons & Dragons, and is quite fitting, as D&D helped inspire MTG some 28 years ago. Now it's coming full circle with us venturing into some adventures in the Forgotten Realms. We are going to see iconic figures like Tiamat and Xanthar get their own MTG cards, as well as characters from Baldur's Gate like Minsk, whose fearless companion Boo is also with us in token form. Their spells any D&D player would recognize, and of course, the timeless Drizzt, or you say Drizzit if you're like me and you just add extra vowels to words sometimes. Anyway, let's look at everything you need to know to be ready for your upcoming pre-release, starting with the dungeon cards. And these, I guess, are a new card type, not a new mechanic, but the point is, there are 3 dungeon cards in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms: Lost Mine of Phandelver, Tome of Annihilation, and Dungeon of the Mad Mage. These appear in the token slot in booster packs, but don't worry if you don't open them. In any limited event, like a pre-release, everyone gets to play with all 3 as if they were in your card pool. They are not in your deck or sideboard, though. They actually start each game in the command zone for each player. And now you're probably wondering, well, how do we go through them? New in this set is the venture mechanic. Venture means you travel into a new dungeon, or if you've already started one, you venture further into your current dungeon. Things to keep in mind: you must complete the dungeon you are currently in before starting a new one. You can venture into the same dungeon more than once, as many times as you want in fact. And of course, you cannot go back or pass through walls. You have to progress following the arrows on the card like any dungeon master would hope for. And once you complete a dungeon, some cards will reward you or give you a bonus for doing so. So quick tip here: in a game, when you first venture, Lost Mine of Phandelver or Tome of Annihilation will most likely be your first choice, since they are far shorter than the Dungeon of the Mad Mage to complete. And while Tome of Annihilation does give you a 4/4 with Death Touch, and that can tempt you to take the shorter route, discarding a card, sacking all the things including a land, is a huge price to pay in Limited for one creature, so just choose your pathing in this dungeon wisely. Other mechanics to know would be Pack Tactics, an ability word that triggers when you attack with creatures that have total power 6 or greater. And then you'll also see flavor words, which I think of as the collective presence of all these new flavorful one-off mechanics, which in this set represent abilities of the monsters or actions of the spells you're casting. This is just like what you'd find in D&D or experience in a D&D campaign. Definitely a big flavor win, even if it doesn't fit the typical narrative or consistency of mechanics in a Magic set. And lastly, you better believe in a D&D theme set, we're going to have a lot of dice rolling. So get ready to bust out your favorite D20 and pray for those nat 20s. Any question about the mechanics, let me know in the comments, but now we're moving on to the archetypes. All 10 archetypes are supported in this set, and hopefully you'll see how each provide you with a unique way to play or adventure in these Forgotten Realms, just like D&D would when building your character. And if you want adventure, Blue-White is the archetype for you, as they are the most focused on the new venture mechanic. Hama helps us get through dungeons ASAP, which in Limited often means card advantage, which then turns into winning. We also can take a quick tangent here to look at the class cards. These are enchantments that we can level up at sorcery speed. They have static abilities, or activated abilities, and or triggered abilities. You don't track these with counters. A class's level, and leveling them up is just something that happens or becomes part of the permanent. Okay, back to the archetype. If we want to adventure, we need ways to venture and payoffs for doing so. If you open a couple white, blue, gold cards, keep an eye out for cards like Delver's Torch, which makes any of your creatures into the adventuring type, Cloister Gargoyle, which ventures and gets better once we complete a dungeon. Same with Nadar, who is one of the best white creatures you can open in the pre-release. He is constantly adventuring and then pumping your entire team once you get through the first dungeon, like a good paladin does. Blue then gives us controlling options to really annoy our opponent. Eccentric Apprentice is great, as it helps us continue to get in for damage every turn by essentially nullifying our opponent's best blocker. My tip here for Blue-White is, unless you open some massive bomby creature, your path to victory is usually going to come from building tiny advantages early and often, and probably using flyers or unblockable creatures to get in for the win. Make sure you have plenty of 2 and 3 drops to get to adventuring as soon as possible. Then if you're unsure of what to venture into as your first dungeon, I would recommend complete Lost Mine of Phandelver first, and then jump into the Dungeon of the Mad Mage next to build that card advantage up. Really, this is blue-white for you. Godspeed if you jump into it. Now, blue-black is surprisingly one of the most combat-focused archetypes in the set. Our half-elf rogue, Prydol, is great at sneaking creatures in for damage. Razalax is happy to watch and help us draw cards when we do damage to our opponent, and we have some creatures who can sneak themselves in, like Wanty Malison. We can lean into venturing because the Esper colors are the most adventurous, but we also just really want to focus on how we keep getting in for damage, because that's where we get our additional value. It may be getting to venture like we see with some rogues, or it may be drawing cards. Trickster's Talisman is amazing if you can make a copy of your bomb creature for essentially 3 mana. However, the rogue class enchantment is one I'm on the fence about, because it's a tad bit expensive, so playing it too early can lead to falling behind on board, but then playing it too late can lead to not getting much benefit from it. With this archetype wanting to attack a lot, not adding creatures early feels like a significant drawback to auto-include in your deck, but in a best-of-3 match, maybe start with it in your sideboard, and then if your opponent is playing a greedy curve, sideboard it in, use it as that perfect way to punish them. Card that is always fantastic, though, is Xanthar. At the beginning of our upkeep, our opponents can't cast spells to mess with what we're doing, and we get access to play the top card of their library during our turn, which just feels like a salt mine in and of itself. Yeah, let's just call it blue-black, the salty combat deck. Keep applying pressure, draw a lot of cards, and if you manage to win a game with Vorpal Sword, please come back, tell me how it went, because I think that's probably as flavorful a win as you can have in the set, and is most likely to happen in this archetype. Now, white-black is another adventure combat-focused color pairing. Both of our gold creatures help us venture, and completing a dungeon makes Borrowin essentially a must-remove card for our opponent, or most likely we just win because we constantly reanimate our lower-costed creatures. Triumphant Adventurer is easily one of the best 2-drops in the set, as it having First Strike and Death Touch makes it extremely difficult to deal with when it's attacking. Beyond adventuring, white-black also has a minor focus on reanimation effects. Feign Death is tremendous if you can use it to trade a creature for a creature, get yours back, make it bigger, and get an ETB effect, all for 1 mana. Probably one of the best CMC instants in the set, but that could also go to Ray of Enfeeblement since it's just straight-up removal. Other reanimation effects would be Dungeon Crawler, just keeps coming back. Fate's Reversal, and Cleric class can bring us back something bomby if we really want. Anyway, as you can see, the Esper colors are all focused a good amount on adventuring, but they each bring something unique. Like white brings more of the attacking to adventure, has good flyers with some interaction. Black brings venturing when we deal damage or something dies with even more interaction. And then blue somewhere in the middle, but point is, if you're playing someone who is playing white, black, and or blue, expect them to be adventuring, and that you'll need to find a way to either handle or outscale their early game. Moving on to red-green, Targnar shows us we are all about the pack tactics mechanic. That is an interesting name, Targnar. We want to attack with creatures and have their total power be 6 or greater to get the pack tactics bonus. I'm hoping you'll notice that this means we have another archetype looking to play creatures early and often and start attacking right away. I think their perfect curve out goes Boots of Speed turn 1, into turn 2 Hobgoblin Captain, into turn 3 another 2-drop that cares about pack tactics, equip the boots, attack. I mean, it's not crazy to expect either because most pack tactics creatures only cost 2 mana, so a good curve out will be difficult to beat. However, instant speed removal can really do some damage to this archetype because we need to have the 6 power when we attack. Losing a creature right before can ruin the attack plan for everyone else, so we need to have some protection or pump spells to keep our stuff around. You can get the ideal start, enjoy the win, but if not, look at your late game and what your late game plan is. Do you get lucky and open a sweet dragon? Great, but if not, green-red always has the biggest creatures, and that's still pretty much true in this set. Just don't play too many of them because aggro is still the name of the game. Now, red-black is treasures and sacrifice. Most archetypes are happy to use the treasures to help splash easily in this set or just ramp, but for this archetype, we want to use them to trigger additional benefits of what we're casting. Kalain gives all of our creatures a 1/1 counter if we use treasures to help cast them. Others, it can be used to draw a card or add another effect, so cards that create us treasures are great, like Hoarding Ogre. Zorn makes all those effects that much better, and Skullport Merchant helps us keep drawing cards once we have excess treasures. With us being red-black, we also save up our treasures to cast a big finisher like Meteor Swarm, because it should essentially wipe our opponent's board, or just play a big bomb or play Orcus to build out our board and finish off our opponent. This archetype feels like one of the most flexible to build and to find a way to win with because the treasures make splashing easy and because red-black has a good deal of removal, so we should be able to handle a couple of big threats from our opponent without much problem and then find our way to victory eventually. But the balance of good early plays and then payoffs for those treasures will be the key to building a powerful Rakdos deck. One color pair that is as straightforward as ever is white-red. Mr. Battlehammer just wants us to equip stuff and attack, and he helps make it all that much easier by giving us one free equip each turn. And that goes a long way because most equip costs are 2 or 3 in this set, if not more, which is pricey in that mid to late game. Playing multiple copies of Dwarfhold Champion is great because it should consistently be a 3/3 with other benefits from the equipment we put on it. The problem I see with this color pairing is getting the right balance of creatures, equipment, and then non-creature, non-equipment spells. You want a lot of creatures, with most being 2 or 3 mana value. You want multiple equipments, at least 3 or 4, so that you can consistently get them out and equip to your creatures, and then that doesn't leave much room for other spells. Your card pool hopefully gives you a good balance of each, but this color pair relies on good draws as much as any. If you get the right mix of creatures and equipment, you can be unstoppable. If you draw too much of one or not enough of the other, you could flounder. The Archetypes class card though, Fighter class, I really like because it replaces itself in your hand, it makes equipping easier, and makes combat really difficult for your opponent to navigate in the mid to late game. Once you look through your card pool, see if you have a low enough curve with the red and white creatures you do open. If you have good enough payoffs, if you have enough equipment, and hopefully the gold cards to bring it all together, this could definitely be the archetype for you, and it seems like a lot of fun, especially if you're into the adventuring in combat. It's very D&D flavor forward. Now, red-blue is probably the most chaotic color pairing because it is the most focused on dice rolling. Faraday is our monster gold creature who is constantly being a menace in combat and hopefully drawing us a good amount of cards. Barbarian class feels like a must-play if you open one because it makes your dice rolling even more exciting, and you will probably find yourself rolling dice more often than you may have expected because there's just a lot of cards that have you roll. And getting one or multiple Brazen Dwarves out can deal a ton of damage and just be your win con by themselves if you open multiple copies. Scion has us roll when it ETBs, Chaos Channeler has us roll when it attacks, and our spells get better the better we can roll with cards like Contact Other Plane. We just want to make sure we have a good balance of payoffs, like Feywild Trickster, because there's not a lot in this set, really only 3 cards that give you additional benefit to rolling dice, but then also having enough cards that get us rolling the dice. I suppose Deck of Many Things is the quintessential risk to reward card for this archetype too. You do pull it. I don't know if you're actually not allowed to play it. I think you just have to put it in your deck. But either way, this archetype brings a lot of situations where your opponent will be wondering, how much is this going to hurt? A lot. We hope it hurts a lot. Moving on, blue-green, I'm going to skim through because it's focused on card draw, and that's not an archetype, it's a phase in a turn. Whatever. Gretchen Titchwillow is an absolute monster in limited, drawing us a card and ramping us for 4 mana at instant speed. She's kind of out of place since most things in the set say only activate at sorcery speed, but moving on. Owlbear is one of the best commons for the mid-game. A 4/4 trampler that draws you a card is really just solid. You'll never be sad to play this card. Wizard class is probably our biggest payoff to drawing additional cards once we get it leveled up. And then keep in mind this archetype is one of the best against aggro, since we should be happy to trade away cards in combat because we should be drawing more cards than our opponent. And that's why I love playing multiple copies of Underdark Basilisk, because it can trade with most creatures early into the late game. Mordenkainen is pretty awesome, as is his Phantom Pup, or we can take a page out of other archetypes. Blue can venture a lot, so maybe that's how we build our lead, or green just gives us the biggest creatures to eventually win with as well. It's card draw, play cards you want to draw, then you draw them eventually, easy win. Okay, moving on. White-green is, I guess, also pretty straightforward. We got life gain. You want to gain the life, you want to build the board. It doesn't get simpler than that. Relisara will get out of hand quickly too if you can gain life early. Steadfast Paladin, probably our best 2-drop because of lifelink. And Priest of Ancient Lore is a really solid 3-drop that replaces itself and gains you life. And if you're worried you won't gain life with any 6-costed spells, don't worry. Hill Giant Herdgorger will put those fears to rest. Drizzt is a house and one of the best creatures in the set, as he should be. Celestial Unicorn will keep scaling as you keep gaining life. Lurking Roper will be a problem if you have ways to gain life, because a 4/5 in the set is brutal to take down. And Prosperous Innkeeper is the best creature to keep us gaining life by just playing other creatures. So the color pairing just feels really strong because the cards themselves are already efficient. The bonuses from gaining life are great, as well as the life gain by itself just also being an effective tool at stabilizing or outpacing other aggro matchups. So as long as you can find your early plays, I think white-green can hang with anyone. Do you agree, Froghemoth? Great. And our last color pair, green-black. Death effects matter. Chesra, as we can see, makes sure some action happens, and then on our end step helps us draw cards. We want other things to die so we can thrive. Got it. It's card draw, it's reanimation, it's our stuff is better than your stuff. Grim Wanderer is one of the best black uncommons in the set. Ebon Death is absolutely obnoxious and overpowered for limited, and Gelatinous Cube is easily one of my favorite cards in the set, even though it doesn't actually trigger dies effects, because it exiles the creature and then just puts it in the graveyard, which is a weird way to get around dies effects. This color pair is similar to blue-green in that you look to outvalue your opponent. You want to play cards that synergize well, whether it's the Warlock class and you focus on getting your opponent to lose life, or you're creating a lot of tokens to make sure you have fodder for other effects like sacrificing and whatnot, or it's playing bigger and better creatures that they can't keep up with. That's black-green in a nutshell. Now let's move on to the tips and tricks for getting into and building your deck during your pre-release. The first thing to make sure of is you have enough 2 and 3 drops. Most archetypes will benefit from playing early creatures and attacking quickly to either venture or start triggering, whatever they're focused on. So aggro will be a constant game plan players are utilizing in this set. You need to make sure you're probably playing a majority of 2 and 3 drops in your color pair. I'm talking 5 or 6 2 drops, 5 or 6 3 drops is exactly where I want to be so I can consistently have early plays and start building my game plan out ASAP. Next, splashing works in this set, and I'd say it's fairly easy to pull off in most color pairs because of Evolving Wilds in the set and the treasure creation we got going on. I don't really like to splash early plays because you usually want to play them on curve, and if you're splashing them, chances are you won't be able to, but it's great to help splash in those big bombs or essential cards you need like removal. Next, main decking artifact and enchantment removal is encouraged because, every color has artifacts they could play, there's enchantment class cards that each wants, and there's enough equipment to make it worthwhile. Plus, most cards that hit artifacts or enchantments have the flexibility to give you other options if there's no exciting targets in play, so the risk is rather low. Other gameplay tips, when it comes to dungeons, like I mentioned with the blue and white archetype, go with Lost Mine of Phandelver first. It's the cheapest and provides something good at every level. Then hopefully you can finish it off quick, get the additional value for your other spells, and then jump into another dungeon that makes more sense, or just repeat it. Remember, you can do the same dungeon more than once, as often as you want, you just have to finish it before you go into the next one. Also be aware of sorcery speed activations. A lot of activated abilities are limited to sorcery speed in the set. So just remember to read your cards carefully because it feels all kinds of bad if you pass and realize at their end step you can't actually do anything you wanted and you wasted the chance to use your mana. This then also means if your opponent leaves mana up, in this set you want to be a bit more cautious because, if you can see on their board that they only have sorcery speed interaction or they have sorcery speed options and they don't use it, chances are they're keeping mana up for something like a combat trick or a counterspell. So yeah, you don't want to play scared, but definitely be more cautious. Try and think through what options they may have in their hand so you don't walk into a blowout situation. Of course, it could also be an act of desperation, knowing they're in top deck mode and hoping it scares you off, but that's one of the joys of Magic and D&D, is having to work with imperfect information. Also, there's going to be a lot of combat in the set, so be ready to suss out when a situation will be a net gain for you and when it's okay to lay back, but again, don't be scared or timid about losing creatures. It happens. Flying is going to be strong in the set. Every color has access to it, so make sure that you're aware or have your own flyers or reach to handle it. And finally, be aware that 4 toughness or greater will stop most attackers. Likewise, 4 power or greater will get through most early and mid-game creatures as well. Beyond that, just have fun, good luck with your polls, and please come back to tell me how your pre-release went in the comments. If you have any other questions for me, let me know down in the comments as well. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel. Thank you to Card Kingdom for sponsoring the channel as well, and all you out there in the YouTubes. Check it out using my affiliate link just to let them know I sent you. Really appreciate it. Take it easy, my friends. See you in the next one. Peace.